I wanted to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading data specialist recruitment business. They are experts in recruitment strategy and delivery for analytics and data teams. They are the go-to recruitment business for all your data roles in Australia, and they can help both with permanent hires and short-term project-focused data resources. I've used Talent Insights in the past, and I've always found them fantastic to work with. Visit them at talentinsights.com.au. Hi, and welcome everyone to another episode of Data Futurology. In Data Futurology, we aim to discuss the challenges that leaders in the space are facing, and we want to bring you different perspectives about how to tackle those challenges, how to improve the use of AI in your organization, how to cover more of the organization with analytics and really drive that data-driven culture throughout the entire enterprise. So thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Felipe Flores. I am your host. Great to see you, everyone. Before we get started, I got to say big thanks to Talent Insights up here, who are our sponsor. They've been sponsoring us for a long time. So if you are either looking for your next role or you are looking to hire people, give them a call. They are great people, and they're very generous with us to help us create this content and offer it to the community for free. So show Talent Insights some love where you can. Today's episode is about using analytics across your entire enterprise. What does that look like to put in analytics behind every nook and cranny throughout the organization? How do you even do that? Like for large organizations, there is so much breadth to cover. You have to be working with so many different stakeholders, have such a deep understanding of the business, be able to run an analytics function that is high performant and at world class. And for that, there's no one better than our guest today. Very excited to have Abhi Seth on the show. He's the Vice President for Data Analytics and Insights at TE Connectivity, which is a huge company. And we'll get Abhi to tell us a little bit more about TE Connectivity. He's had a wealth of experience. Before this, he was head of data analytics at Honeywell Aerospace. So definitely, and he's also an advisor in the International Institute for Analytics Expert Network. So we are very excited to have Abhi on the show. Abhi, how are you going today? Great to see you, mate.
Very good. And thanks so much for hosting me here and inviting me on this Data Futurology podcast. I've been following your podcast for a while, so glad to be here.
Oh, mate. Too kind, and we are very, very excited to talk to you, to have you on the show, and to discuss all things enterprise analytics, and especially with the breadth of coverage that you've been able to achieve throughout your roles. I really like how you're putting the whole organization in the mindset from the start. So that's great. Before we jump into that, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
That's a great question. I think so. I mean, I started out my passion. I'm an industrial engineer by domain. That's how I started my journey as an undergrad, and then got into research. And my PhD was in mechanical engineering and human-computer interaction. So kind of a double major PhD where I could, read the human cognitive aspects and then virtual reality applications for mechanical engineering, which is a lot about basically, back 20 years ago, it was really more all about simulation. Right? How do you simulate environments and create models where, you create a suspension of disbelief for a user, right? So you can actually make people believe like they're in a virtual environment, just like they're in a real environment. So starting out from there, I was going to go be a professor, but then decided to go join industry on the dark side, I would say. That's what my professor always called it, She's like, are you sure, you want to be a professor, Abhi? And I'm like, I did a postdoc. I had a small team, of researchers. I was getting funding and I was applying for professor positions. And then, I got too excited about somebody mentioned virtual reality is just, somebody mentioned it's pretty pictures and a gaming tool, not very applicable for value in industry. And that got me, changed very drastically to, I'm going to show you that this is actually valuable. because there are real industrial problems that you can solve with VR. So that's how I joined Caterpillar R&D Center. And we had like 2 engineers and 1 VR lab on the global R&D Center for Caterpillar, large company, $50 billion plus revenue, world's largest mining construction equipment manufacturer. Great, environment for driving innovation and growth. And, as we did a lot of work VR applications, what I realized quickly is we need to take this tool away from, the hands of just 2 R&D engineers. So 2 people out of 100,000 knew how to use virtual reality. We had a separate refrigerated room that still cracks me up, because we had a separate refrigerated room for our computer that did all the calculations, because IT couldn't support it. It was a Sun Microsystems computer with a separate refrigeration system. It gets so hot, right, in our lab. And we used to do managed support and run these demos. So how do you take, technology that is so complex to use and then really put it in the hands of engineers so that they can use it on a daily basis to drive and build products and drive product development? And that's kind of the exciting thing that, we did, which was exciting in terms of taking VR and then just making it so easy to do file upload, make people use technology that is so at the cutting edge and making it easy to use. And then suddenly it took off, and Caterpillar had 14 VR centers, and all the products were using virtual reality in their product design. So that, how do you put simulation in the hands of engineering teams, product development teams, so that they can find issues early in the design process, which is more like being predictive, right? Before you cut iron. Several $100,000 or millions of dollars of prototypes that, you build, and then you find out there is an issue with serviceability or visibility or ergonomics. You can find all of that in virtual environments in a simulation. So that's kind of like a predictive capability. And that was very, very popular, captured a lot of value. And then I got bored doing the same thing. So I got into strategy. So I spent a few years in Japan with the excavation division with product strategy. And as I was doing my strategy role, I started, because of my simulation and math background, I started using, data quite a bit, because, 4 months in, I realized as I talk to a lot of people and understand the business and really get my, hands dirty, I realized that a lot of people use a lot of perspectives. I wouldn't say opinions, but like a lot of perspectives that I don't know how deeply grounded in data they were. So a lot of the strategy was, yes, we are building high volume. We're going about doing this. And then as I start to dig data, then I realized that, hey, some of these are probably notions that are not applicable or not true. So I was able to start to show people the data. And actually, a couple projects I worked on was around inventory, when we had a huge amount of excess inventory in the business. And I'm not going to say the numbers, but I mean, that project created more than $100 million plus of operating income in the first year.
Wow.
And that got
in the first year.
In the first year. And that was basically a huge amount of reduction in inventory for excavator division. And that got everybody's thinking that, hey, you're using data to drive, operations and distribution strategy for one business. And these challenges happen across multiple businesses, right? So I think going back to doing it for the broader set of business units across Caterpillar. So I think I came back and joined the simulation group again, and then slowly got into analytics as I started to drive more decision making through data, right? So I got very passionate about business outcomes. I mean, same thing that I did with virtual reality, and how do you really take a technology that is early on and connect it with some outcomes? And then as soon as you connect it with outcomes and applicability and make it easy to use, it just took off from one VR center to like 14, 15 VR centers across the globe. Same thing is with analytics, right? How do you take, capability to answer business questions and drive decision making, and then democratize it and make it easy for people to use? And then suddenly, you can unlock a lot of value in a large, complex industrial company, right? So that's kind of how I got into analytics. And Caterpillar got some really, really exciting roles and amazing leaders that I learned from, and mentors as well. So a lot of that journey was really, I got in charge of managing the analytics portfolio. So at that time, we were doing 100 projects a year and creating $100 million of identified opportunity, but only 3% of the projects were identifying the opportunity. 97% were kind of like experiments. So how do you shift? That is like 6-7 years ago, right? So how do you shift that thinking from, how do you basically improve portfolio yield? How do you pick the right problems? How do you define what the outcome and value is? So I got a lot of time to do that and thinking. So that was a lot of fun. And then at the end, I was leading go-to-market for Caterpillar. So how do you take analytic products and build them for end customers and take analytics to market in construction, mining industry, as well as some work in marine industry. So doing some analytics on Disney's cruise ships, large mining trucks in Australia. So I had a lot of visits in Australia and Brisbane, Sydney, Perth. So I love I love Australia and, love visiting. And I think as I was doing that, a call came from Honeywell where they said, hey, we are looking for somebody to lead our analytics team and build out an analytics team. And I'm like, okay, it's 2016. You don't have an analytics team? It's like, no, we don't have an analytics team. I'm like, okay, sounds good. I can help with that. And then, very quickly I got the position, I got in. And that was really exciting because Honeywell had a very clear strategy around monetizing analytics and really becoming a software industrial. Phenomenal set of people, great support from top leadership all the way from CEO. And that really helped, drive that momentum on how do you build a team. So we built a team all the way from, 3 people to around 70, 75 people in 2.5 years, took different analytics products to market, worked directly with end customers, did some enterprise analytics as well. So lots of fun building, advanced data analytics and data science teams. And then, the TE opportunity side kind of knocked on the door, which was about not just the analytics piece, but also the broader enterprise architecture, enterprise data management, data governance, and managing all of the data and publishing it. And that I was like, okay, I've not done that before. Sounds challenging. And I think I'm always up for a challenge and learning something new. So I decided to join TE. So I'm here responsible for enterprise data architecture, data management, data governance, data visualization tools architecture, and data science, scaling data science for the company. So that's kind of my current role.
Man, a huge remit. We had a comment from Conrad as you're talking. He says, amazing experience that you have, Abhi. Never knew Caterpillar and these companies do analytics. I guess that they're the dark horses in the industry, in the analytics industry, to say like, yeah, it's unexpected that, when you hear so much focus on like telco and finance and, maybe even healthcare and things like that. Obviously big tech, that's kind of like where people's mind goes to when you talk about, or when at least in the media, that's where the data science and analytics focus is.
Yeah.
So to hear about heavy industrials and how the analytics has been transforming companies in that space as well, it's very exciting. Yeah, and being in your case in the driver's seat, that is excellent, man.
I think a lot of times it's interesting. It's a very interesting comment how the lack of awareness outside. I think industrial companies aren't too big at touting the horn on analytics. But if you think about companies like Caterpillar, and Honeywell and TE, they have deep engineering and domain expertise, right? And building really complex products and systems that require a lot of simulation and a lot of domain knowledge and technical knowledge to build, right? And data is basically, a important component in driving that integrated supply chain, the right customer experience, right? And I think that Caterpillar has been doing analytics since, if I remember right, the first time I heard, and I don't quote me, I might be wrong, but since 2004, in the form of when they called it analytics. But I think, as a term, but, using data for driving decision making and simulation has been happening since, 90s at least, if not late 80s.
Incredible. Actually, I'll ask you a little bit to tell us a little bit about TE in a second. But before I do, we've had almost 60% of people have answered the poll so far. So for the people that, and thank you for everyone who's answered it so far. For the people that haven't yet, please take a moment to answer the poll. You should have either a pop-up or a banner on your phone, usually kind of like in green letters. Otherwise, if you're on the computer, it'll be in the bottom in the Zoom options there. So Abhi, for the people that don't know TE Connectivity, could you give us a quick introduction?
Absolutely. I think TE is one of the companies that everybody has used a TE product. Almost everybody, I can say, but probably not the most known brand name, right? So TE Connectivity is a global company with around $14 billion of revenue. We make products, small connectors, harnesses, sensors, and specialized connectors, basically relays for all kinds of industries. So a huge amount of business that we have is for auto industry. So we are heavy into car electrification and traditional auto manufacturing, right? And connectors for auto. And then we have, multiple businesses, including, we provide connectors for aerospace, defense, marine systems and components, data and devices. So folks like Amazon, Google, and companies who are basically hyperscalers that are building these large cloud platforms and compute farms. Dishwashers. You can find a TE component in a dishwasher, in a coffee maker, all the way. You can see sensors that go across multiple industries, from power plants to automobiles to data centers. And a lot of industrial equipment, machines like large mining trucks and excavators and wheel loaders.
So I wanted to ask you about the centers of excellence. So maybe we can start around on the purpose of centers of excellence, and then we can talk about building some and kind of like take it from there. So first, could you do an introduction of centers of excellence for the people that don't know, and describe a little bit the purpose?
I think a lot of times the COE for analytics is really focused on building kind of a core competency within a company, right? Where you are able to bring and consolidate the talent from, different business units, different areas, and then put all the talent in one place. And then the charter for a COE can be, different companies can pick a different set of objectives and success criteria, but ultimately the intention is to bring all kinds of analytics, BI, AI reporting talent together, so that we can create a, single one-stop shop, and then optimize, investment, make sure that people have a community, to basically be a part of, and then drive economies of scale, right? In terms of, single decision making around tools, platforms, consistency in processes, drive maturity around, processes, and how do you go solve the problem, how do you address something, and basically, trying to centralize the investment so that what you have invested in, and then hold some core team accountable, right? And that's the team that all the analytics projects kind of go to. So that's kind of a COE.
Yeah, that is excellent. And we had a question from Shi asking, two good questions actually. So I think we covered, one of them is, what is the data science or analytics COE's responsibility, which I think you covered there, or would you like to expand on any parts of the responsibility?
I think the responsibility is really building their core competencies around analytics, right? A lot of the companies do not have analytics as a core function or a competency. So really, that COE helps build that capability within the team. And then really applying that capability to unlock some kind of a business or customer or shareholder value, ultimately, right? And then help people solve the problem.
Yeah, great. And she also asks, what is the difference between a data science or analytics COE and a centralized department?
I think it's kind of the same thing. I mean, a centralized approach can be, now COEs, can be, it's an interesting question depending upon the company size, right? I think the centralized is basically when you look at a corporate function versus different business units. If you bring all the talent in one location and centralize all the data and analytics talent, and all the businesses and functions really use that central team, that's really truly centralized model of how do you serve analytics. The other way can be a COE at the center, and then small COEs can in individual businesses is kind of another model, but ultimately a COE can be a, set of people who are dedicated and responsible for analytics within either a whole company or within a smaller business unit, and not having a single person reporting in a distributed way completely, right? I think some people really like hiring machine learning and data science experts under product managers, one person each, and then that's another way of doing it.
Right. So then the other approach is having a matrix structure. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think having some kind of a matrix structure where, I think it's more like a distributed structure is what I meant, right? I think a distributed structure is you don't really have any analytics team. You just find everybody hires their own data scientist, their own analyst as they see fit.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of benefits to centralizing. Particularly like the community aspect and having kind of like support and career paths and sharing of knowledge, which is so important in our industry. Do you think that there's a point of maturity in the organization's analytics journey where it's more important to be centralized, and then other times where it makes sense to be decentralized?
That's a great question. And I think that I would say there are no real right or wrong answers in that, right? I think every company culture has a big influence, right, on how the company actually operates and how much centralization, if there are centralization is kind of a culture and other functions are centralized and the business units and the corporate teams are used to working that way. Sometimes that model kind of works, and then other companies, are decentralized. But ideally, there's kind of pros and cons, right, of both models. But having some level of deeper connectivity for analytics team with the business is always very important, is what I feel like. No matter if you have a team that is fully central or distributed, or you have a hub and a spoke where you have competency within the business and competency at the center, you really need to make sure that, that connectivity with the business, understanding what the right strategy is and what's important, what are the value drivers, that is very clearly understood by the analytics team, because it's ultimately analytics is really an outcome game and a business, change management game more than an algorithm game. Although we talk about, Hadoop, Python, Spark, cloud platforms and data migrations all the time, but ultimately it's all about business change management and outcome and delivering the right, customer and shareholder value.
That is great. I love that focus on the outcome and on improving the business. That's definitely it from my opinion is the right way to measure the analytics teams, measure the impact, the benefit, and it's a way that I think people should measure themselves, their own contribution. It's not about, in my view, it's not about how many lines of code can somebody write in a day, but it's about what's the impact of the work that you're doing. So it seems that you have a similar point of view and you ingrain that throughout your teams. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. I think so. That gets us to more like, how do you measure success of analytics, right? I think it's really, it all starts out with what is the objective? Why are you building an analytics team? And I think that's kind of the question I ask a lot when I talk to different companies and in my advisory role is, what is the objective? Why do it, right? And I think having a very clear answer around the why and is actually very important. Otherwise, you can apply analytics and digital and data in every kind of problem, right, that you want. And there is no end of problems we can apply it to. But until we know clearly, why are we here? That question needs to be answered before you hire your first data scientist, right? Yeah. Because that also influences the kind of people you want to hire, right? If you are building, for example, predictive services around prognostics and, component failure for a mining truck or an aircraft or something else, a power grid, you need people who have engineering background, who understand FMEA, failure mode effect analysis, who understand, basically how systems are made, how mechanical and electromechanical systems work together. And they have a very different way of thinking, and IoT data is very different. Versus if you are trying to go, grow your customer base or grow sales or drive digital marketing, you really need a very different set of people. Or you're trying to do, pricing or finance analytics, you really need a different set of people, right? So you gotta have your strategy, very crisp and clear around why are you building the team. And what do you want to get out of it? And then the second important thing, as the team starts to come along and you have an analytics leader, the other key thing is really understanding how are you going to measure success?
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do that because not every activity and every effort you're going to do is going to result in, a direct, you can point to, hey, analytics enabled it, because ultimately analytics is an enabling function. Analytics doesn't really make you more money. It just makes you smarter. It's like the vitamin that you take every day. You can't say, it's a good to have, but you can't say, hey, I did it. I came first because of that vitamin. No. The point is that, it's an enablement function. But if you are able to clearly pick, and understand, okay, based on your business strategy, what are the value pools? How do you focus that small analytics effort as you're building it to the right set of problems, to the right set of business objectives, and then picking the problems that have a very clear outcome goal in terms of I always tell people, you should be able to walk it in one hand, saying, what is the problem? And, what is the insight you need to solve it, right? What are you going to do differently if you had the insight, and who's going to do it, right? And how is value created, right? I think, and then somebody would say, what is the opportunity? Somebody would say, I have $100 million of inventory. If I can reduce 5% of it, it's going to be a $5 million opportunity around the project. Well, great. You now have a financial number to tie to a project. But my next favorite question is, okay, so how do you make the first dollar?
Yeah.
On the problem. If I give you this insight, if I predict you X, Y, Z, that a lot of people always worry about, you can't predict, it's so difficult. Well, I've predicted more times than people have been able to get that first dollar, because you have to sit down and think about, okay, if I had this, here is what I would do differently. And here is how the outcome is going to get created. And here is the KPI that we are already tracking, and that's going to come down. Or is your ship to request rate going to go up? Is your total chain inventory going to go down? Whatever that is. But do you have a clear understanding of, what is your problem? What is the insight? What's the value, action? Then you can go and do the analytics. That's kind of a qualifier in my mind.
Man, that is excellent. And we had a comment from Conrad saying that he really likes the how do you make the first dollar. So that focus on value.
That focus on value is absolutely critical. I mean, a few things you can look at, in terms of metrics and managing analytics success, you can, a lot of companies measure intent. So do you have strategic alignment for the project, right? If you don't, what it tells you, if you have a alignment and sponsorship from top management, then the change management piece is going to get driven, because it has to be a business problem that the business is working on, and not an analytics project.
Yeah.
Because as soon as it becomes an analytics project, it's going to become an analytics outcome and not a business outcome. Right? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it has to be a business project. So strategic alignment with the top business strategy or value driver is important. The other thing you can look at measuring is team performance for analytics, right? Okay, what is your NPS score? Are you projects within budget, within time? What is your percentage project success? A lot of people measure that. Hey, I start all these POCs. How many of them successful? How many are not? A lot of people measured. I've seen, I don't know, recently I've not come across, but team utilization. I've had this big COE. How much percentage utilization is this team is utilized? How big of a backlog do we have? But ultimately, you get what you measure. Right. Yes. I think I've seen people measuring utilization. They got utilization. I've seen teams measure ROI and impact, and really spending time honing in on picking the right problem so that they can create the value, and they got value. Right. So it's really all about, on the result side, you can look at analytics ROI, realized dollars, not identified, but realized dollars.
Yeah.
And then that come basically 12 to 18 months after you have implemented something. And then adoption. I think that's another key one to actually think about, because as you think about analytics is all about change management. Adoption becomes a very, very good metric for any COE or any analytics team, because, I generally say it's 75% adoption, because it's like 3 out of 4 projects get used by the business. And when I say that, what I mean by that is, you start out with a complex problem. You don't know you're going to solve it or not. But once it's solved and you have actually created the insight that you were thinking about, is it getting picked up by the business and getting, taken forward and implemented? Or is it like, oh, my priority has changed. Nice to know. Thank you. I love what the outcome you created, but, whatever that is after the but, right? It's basically not getting used, right? So you get
like, thanks, but no thanks.
Thanks, but no thanks. Exactly. Yeah. If you get that, then you're like, okay. So if you can get 3 out of 4 projects that are successful and they get adopted, that you're working on the right problems. Because I think a lot of the biggest challenge for analytics is you're not working on the right problem. It's not about the model. It's not about the data as much, or those things are needed. But if you pick the wrong problem, you can spend months and weeks utilizing your very rare and few and hard to find resources on things that don't matter.
Exactly right, man. I love your focus on this. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.